The vast expanses of Africa and South Asia are home to many great lineages of animals. Surviving in the vast open plains, in the mountains and forest is a wide array of fauna, from the many primates to big cats, canids, rhinos, birds of prey, and so many more. But reigning supreme above them all are the largest land animals alive today. With their impressive stature, muscular trunks, and an emotional intelligence unique among non-primate species, elephants are one of the true marvels of the extant animal kingdom. Being found as far south as South Africa and the Sunda Islands, to as far north as the Himalayas in southern China, these colossal ecosystem engineers have cemented themselves as perhaps the most iconic animals of the old world, and some of the most beloved animals to many across the globe. However, in modern times there are only 3 species of living elephants, the last remnants of the massive Proboscidea order that traces its lineage back to the time right after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. However, this low diversity was not always the case, for into the times of the Pleistocene, the thunderous herds and triumphant calls of these magnificent animals echoed across the globe. This was a time when the elephants ruled a world frozen in ice, thundering across the vast expanse of the single largest biome to ever exist in the history of our planet. One specific group of ancient elephant would come to dominate the Ice Age world like no other, and is today recognized as one of the most famous extinct animals of all time, rivaling even the great Tyrannosaurus rex. Covered in shaggy hair with gigantic curved tusk, and lending its name to the massive biome from which it hailed, these animals would thrive in the Ice Age world like no others, spanning across 3 different continents and millions of square kilometers. And, just as these creatures dominated the Ice Age, they would be some of the last to let it go, as these animals would persist into the times of the first human civilizations, even outlasting some of the very first empires in human history. This is the story of one of the most magnificent animals of all time. This is the story of the Woolly Mammoth, a Megafaunal Legacy. The beginning of this story takes place in the year 1728, with publications written by Sir Hans Sloane, an Anglo-Irish physician, naturalist, and collector. One of his publications is considered to be the first ever comprehensive scientific article on the existence of mammoths. The paper itself, rather than having the claims be based on fully examined fossil evidence, was written based on travelers' descriptions of exceptionally large bones scattered throughout Siberia and Britain. At the time, mammoth remains were considered to be that of modern elephants, and Sloane's mention of them in his paper was more so his questioning whether or not they belonged to something different than simply just modern elephants. Unfortunately, he drew no further conclusion on the matter. During this time, scholars like Johann Philipp Brein would argue that the bones of the mammoths were simply some type of elephant that had been lost to the Great Biblical Flood. This conclusion was due to the fact that animals that are typically found in tropical or warm climates would not be able to live within the cold regions of Siberia, to which the idea of a massive earth-covering flood transporting the bones there would be a common explanation. Despite the controversy, in 1799, German naturalist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach would be the first to give a description to the mammoth, classifying it as Elephas primigenius, meaning firstborn elephant in Latin. His intent on the taxonomy was to place it within the same genus as the modern Asian elephant, until it would later be pitched in a different classification coined as Elephas mammontius. The word mammoth didn't have a conclusive origin at the time. However, in 1706, the word mammoth would be added in the Oxford English Dictionary. This term was derived from the Russian word mamont, which means earthhorn in the Siberian native Mansi language, to which they would refer to the animal's tusk that they uncovered well before Europeans came to the scene. When this definition reached Europe, however, mammoth would be first used as memanto before transitioning to mammoth. In 1802, American President and founding father of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, was also interested in fossils at the time and would classify the fossils in his own collections from places like Saltville, Virginia and Big Bone Lick in Kentucky as belonging to mammoths, to which later on they'd be properly classified as mastodon. However, in 1802, he would be the one partially responsible for creating a new definition for the word mammoth to being an adjective to describe size. Going ahead of time, in 1828, the species name Mammuthus would be added into Joshua Brooks' description to the woolly mammoth, coining Mammuthus borealis. It would be in 1942, long after his passing in 1935, Henry Fairfield Osborn's new description for the mammoth would be published. Osborn had went through Blumenbach's collections in Göttingen University and studied his mammoth specimens, to which some he had examined are from the unrelated straight-tusked elephant Paleoloxodon antiquus, but the rest he would arrange Blumenbach's and Brooks' previous specifications under the new name Mammuthus primigenius, the woolly mammoth. Prior to this final and most recognizable description, between 1692 to 1806, a total of 4 descriptions of frozen woolly mammoth would come to light, skeletons that still contained flesh and skin. However, the remains were never actually recovered, leading to no extensive examinations of the skeletons throughout the time. It would be until founding father of paleontology, French naturalist and zoologist Jean-Leopold Nicolas Frederick Baron Cuvier, more famously known as Georges Cuvier, would gather his materials and argue conclusively that the skeletons of the Siberian mammoth was a different species to that of the 2 known species of elephant at the time. The argument on whether the described bones belonged to elephants or something else would persist until something new happened in Siberia that would change everyone's understanding completely. In 1805, a man by the name of Mikhail Adams was traveling to the Arctic Siberian peninsula of Mysbykov on a scientific expedition with an organized team. The team stayed there after an unsuccessful mission in China. However, Adams had initially heard about a mammoth carcass within the Lena Delta from its discoverer, a resident of Shumachov village named Skumachov. Adams gathered his team and they ventured to where the mammoth was last sighted. To his disappointment, when he arrived, the mammoth had apparently been partially eaten by scavengers, leaving behind minimal organic material such as the mummified skin on top of the skull. Adams would also draw an artistic reconstruction of the animal prior to the initial recovery. Rather than elephantine in appearance, Adams' reconstruction was rather boar-like, with the tusk protruding from opposite directions. Despite his initial disappointment with what remained of the specimen, Adams successfully recovered the skeleton and went on to search for the rest of the remains, to which components like the tusk, foreleg, as well as some skin had already been sold by Skumachov and taken to market. Eventually, the scientist would spot and buy a large pair of tusks with the confidence that he'd coincidentally found the animal's original tusk. At the end of his efforts to gather as much of the animal as possible, Adams would unknowingly recover the most complete woolly mammoth specimen ever recorded. The Adams mammoth would be assembled in St. Petersburg by German naturalist and explorer Wilhelm Gottlieb Tilesius. Tilesius had a seemingly great challenge ahead of him. He had never reconstructed an extinct animal before, and with good reason. The mammoth would be one of the first attempts at reassembling a long-forgotten species following the reconstruction of Megatherium in 1795. But with the help of the Kunstkamera, a museum founded by Peter the Great himself, Tilesius used a skeleton of an Indian elephant as reference to reconstructing the woolly mammoth. Most of the skeleton's reassembly was correct. However, one error he did make was a key feature of the animal, the tusk. Mounted on the wrong sides of the skull, the tusk faced downward in Tilesius's reconstruction. This would not be corrected until the year 1899, and even then, debates continued continued on the correct placement of the mammoth's tusk throughout the 20th century. It would be 1815 that Tilesius would sketch and write a detailed publication on the skeleton. As far as the findings of the woolly mammoth go, the discoveries that followed the Adams specimen would morph into a true doorway into the past. Discoveries of the species' fossils would cross almost every corner of the globe, from specimens in Africa, Britain, Siberia, to even as far as the eastern coast of North America. Both fossilized and mummified woolly mammoth specimens would be uncovered throughout history up to even today. However, because of there being so much material of this animal, we will only cover its most important frozen and fossilized specimens. One unique characteristic about a majority of mammoth discoveries in the cold regions of Siberia is that they are likely to be mummified in permafrost, similar to the mummified material on the original Adams mammoth. Another great example is a 1901 finding at the Berezovka River in Siberia. To much surprise, the one who first found the mammoth there wasn't a human at all, but a dog who noticed the smell coming off of the carcass. The mammoth's skull was completely bare of skin, as well as its trunk, which was likely due to scavenging. However, the other half of the animal completely mummified in the frost. In life, it was a 35 to 40-year-old male, to which radiocarbon dating suggests it lived 35,000 years ago. How the animal died was likely due to asphyxiation. The shoulder blade was also broken, suggesting that the mammoth may have fallen into a crevasse. Soon, the Russian authorities would arrive to excavate it. This process took 10 months to complete, and the mammoth would be transported in pieces to St. Petersburg. Today, a replica of the mammoth with attached pieces of the original carcass's skin and fur is on display at the Museum of Zoology in St. Petersburg. By 1929, instead of a decrease of discoveries, mummified mammoth remains would be uncovered at an astounding rate. 34 remains of woolly mammoths would be unearthed in Siberia, all containing soft tissues such as skin, flesh, and even organs. While mummies of mammoth would continue to be uncovered, fossils and well-preserved bones of the animals would also be discovered, often in mass accumulations. Mammoth accumulations are often understood as areas where mammoths either have fallen in or have become stuck in natural mud traps. Over time, these sites would accumulate multiple individuals, as many of the animals would visit these traps as potential water sources. Places like a location in the North Sea called Doggerland, or even places like the petroleum seeps in Poland, would all contain multiple individuals of mammoths that have died within the traps at different times. Russia would also have similar accumulations. In 1947, there would be a discovery of one of these accumulations at Bioriolyok River within Yakutia, Russia. What makes this river so unique is that it's the final resting place for around 140 woolly mammoths. More than 8,000 bones have been recovered within just a single spot. The remains were apparently deposited there by currents, and as such, for the longest time, a natural accumulation would form. But it would not just be Russia that housed such extraordinary finds. Across the Pacific in the frigid lands of Alaska, another mammoth would be uncovered. However, this one didn't belong to an adult, but rather a calf. In 1948, gold miners within Fairbanks Creek, Alaska, would uncover the mummified trunk, head, and forelimbs of a woolly mammoth calf. It would later be named Iphi. The find at the time was so astonishing that it became the most famous frozen mammoth find in Alaska. Studies would show that Iphi was around 25,000 years old. However, due to the specimen needing to be preserved in glycerine for collections, Iphi had to be redated in 1951 and 1968, to which her latest estimated age is around 32,000 years. Back in the icy worlds of Siberia, more and more mammoth calves would follow, some becoming the most recognizable mummified discoveries to paleontology. On June 23, 1977, an area of thawed ground was being stripped alongside the Kolyma River. While bulldozers were removing the loose rock sediments, operator Anatoly Logachev would hit a large, dark, and hairy mass in the gravel. He had stumbled upon one of the most complete male mammoth calf mummies of all time. It would later be understood that this mammoth had been 7 to 8 months old when it died. Its internal organs were also examined, to which they were very similar to that of modern elephants, although one difference that sets them apart were the ears. The calf's ears were proportionately smaller than that of a modern elephant calf's ears. This calf would eventually be named Dima, and he would be radiocarbon dated at 40,000 years. Other mammoth mummies would continue to be uncovered, one being a less intact specimen in 19 1988 named Mascha, discovered in the Yamal Peninsula of Siberia. Mascha was found to have been much younger than Dima at 3 to 4 months in age. Her cause of death may have been due to a laceration found on her right foot. However, Dima was still considered the most complete mammoth calf ever discovered for the time, but another mammoth calf would eventually turn up that surpassed Dima's completion. Following Dima, another mammoth calf discovered in 2007 called Liuba would surpass Dima in terms of preservation. What makes Liuba so complete is that even her eyes and trunk were intact. Liuba's skin and organs were also in perfect condition. She would later be transferred to Japan at the Jikai University School of Medicine. Our last key specimen to discuss is the discovery of a frozen specimen called the Jarkov Mammoth in 1997. Named after the Jarkov family who discovered it, this specimen was found on the Taimyr Peninsula in Siberia. The Jarkov mammoth was estimated to have lived 20,000 years ago and may have died around the age of 47. The Jarkov family would contact Bernard Bugues, a French explorer, to investigate the specimen. At first, it seemed to have been a set of tusks protruding from the ice, but it would be understood by Bugues that the tusks were still attached to the mammoth. In order to remove it, his team would cut out the mammoth as a giant block of ice with the tusk still attached. The mammoth cube would be transported by a heavy load transport helicopter to an ice cave somewhere within the region. So far, over 36 scientists from around the world have studied and taken samples of the mammoth trapped in the block of ice. Bone marrow, plant samples, and even 50 radiocarbon dated samples have all been extracted from the mammoth. However, it is unclear as to exactly how well preserved the mammoth is. Despite this large amount of preserved evidence for this animal, there are no woolly mammoths walking amongst us today. Just like most species within Earth's history, they too disappeared forever. However, both the woolly mammoth's discovery and the findings that followed it would herald an extraordinary collection of data about their lives, and with all of this well-preserved genetic data, it continues to leave one questioning. Can we make efforts to revive this forgotten species? Can the woolly mammoth march on Earth once again? The existence of such well-preserved soft tissue from the woolly mammoth, as well as a plethora of extraordinary DNA samples, the idea to possibly clone a woolly mammoth would be through de-extinction. As stated in our 2024 video covering the dodo bird, de-extinction is a type of species revivalism or a resurrection-based biology. The goal for de-extinction is to create an organism using both extant and extinct genetic material to generate an animal similar to a long-extinct species. To birth such an animal, geneticists would utilize a process called selective breeding, which in other words is a form of artificial selection. This process takes either animal or plant breeding to develop particular phenotypic traits. This is commonly done as many domesticated species are born with various desired phenotypic traits. As a result, we now have many different breeds of animals hosting a variety of desired phenotypic traits such as different breeds of dogs, cats, cows, and even pigeons. Combining these two methodologies, the dream to bring back one of the most famous extinct animals slowly becomes possible. So far, there is one company that plans to revive the woolly mammoth, that being Colossal Biosciences, founded by George Church and Ben Lamb. The revival of the woolly mammoth would be one of the most talked about de-extinction projects for the company, aside from the dodo and the Tasmanian tiger. However, before this project fell into the hands of Colossal, its beginnings started with another company founded by husband and wife Stuart Brand and Ryan Phelan called Revive and Restore. From its foundation, the goal for the company was to provide biotech solutions for conservation. The projects they have consist of not just the mammoth's revival, but also the resurrection of the famed passenger pigeon, but their efforts don't just stop there, for they also have projects involving conservation efforts to cloning endangered species such as the black-footed ferret, which had already been declared extinct twice until its latest rediscovery in 1981, and preserving the last wild horse on Earth, the Przewalski's horse. In 2013, the company would organize the first public meeting on de-extinction, to which the main focus would be that of the woolly mammoth. However, through negotiations with Colossal founder George Church in 2021, the project would be transferred to colossal. In order to create a similar species to the woolly mammoth, Colossal's teams would first have to obtain well-preserved DNA from the various specimens found from the permafrost in both Alaska and Siberia. Then the next objective is to sequence a complete genome from the mammoth, and then they move on to gene sequencing the mammoth's last living relative, the Asian elephant. After this, their next step is to identify the genes that made the woolly mammoth so resilient to the Ice Age climate. This involves the phenotypic genes like the mammoth's shaggy hair, curved tusk, and hemoglobin. Following this, there is gene splicing. Gene splicing and editing is where they will essentially cut the elephant DNA and insert the missing gaps within the sequence from the mammoth's DNA. Once this process is completed, the next steps involve a manufacturing of a cell line, followed by nuclear transfer, to which fuses the edited nucleus into the egg of a healthy female Asian elephant. Once the embryo is implanted, finally the gestation process commences, and eventually the potential successor to the woolly mammoth is born. The de-extinction of the woolly mammoth provides even greater services than just advances in biotechnology. Today, modern elephants face many grave threats ranging from poaching, habitat loss, and as for the Asian elephant in particular, a herpes epidemic that has caused a mass killing of calves in captivity, known as the elephant endotheliotropic herpes virus, or EEHV for short. Rather than just bringing back an elephant species lost to time, these de-extinction attempts may help bolster the conservation of elephants and other modern-day megafauna. Using vitro, scientists have been attempting to synthesize the virus in hopes of developing a variant of said virus that can be grown in a lab to better help analyze it and develop an effective cure. In 2024, the first ever vaccine was developed for this strain and was injected to an Asian elephant named Tess at the Houston Zoo, along with 2 out of 4 Asian elephants at the Cincinnati Zoo in the fall of the same year. As of 2025, these elephants have since tested negative for the virus, showing the vaccine's effectiveness. Along with that, attempts could be made at engineering biomarkers to better protect elephants from poaching for their tusk, whether it to be to help better track poachers or to alter them in a way to where they're no longer desirable by poachers while still maintaining their massive tusk. On top of that, the assisted reproduction of a de-extinct mammoth may also help in similar efforts of birthing attempts among megafaunal species. Another idea that the genetics of the woolly mammoth may help with is the concept of rebuilding the Great Steppe grasslands of the last glacial maximum. Pleistocene Park is a nature reserve on the Koyma River in northeastern Siberia. Led by Russian scientists Sergei Zimov and Nikita Zimov, Pleistocene Park houses a great deal of modern fauna that once walked alongside the woolly mammoth within the steppe biome. The park is essentially a test to prove the hypothesis on whether or not reintroduction of modern species that once thrived in the mammoth steppe could rebuild the rich grassland ecosystems and perhaps rebuild the climate to where less permafrost will thaw and reduce greenhouse gases. At first, the idea of bringing in a de-extinct animal was only a vague vision and unconsidered for the time at the park. But thanks to the recent developments in bringing an animal with similar cold-withstanding traits as the woolly mammoth, the idea is that just like its modern-day descendants, the woolly mammoth was an ecosystem engineer, to which the hope is that the de-extinct mammoth could do the same thanks to its genetic traits. Zimov has permitted the open offer to place the de-extinct species into Pleistocene Park as a way for the animal's reintroduction. In a way, the woolly mammoth may continue to provide a beneficial impact to the planet, thanks to its potential revival and perhaps through the help of dedicated conservationists, environmentalists, and the geneticists striving to achieve this goal. Perhaps the woolly mammoth can even help give its modern descendants the boost they need to continue the journey as some of planet Earth's largest ecosystem engineers. However, in order to revive such a unique species, we'd have to know exactly what it might have looked like, and what its key characteristics would have been that truly make it a woolly mammoth. Unlike other animals that have been lost to time over the history of life on Earth, we actually have a very clear picture as to what the woolly mammoth looked like in life based upon the numerous mummified specimens found in the ice throughout the years, as well as various cave paintings depicting the animal. To start out with the similarities to their extant relatives, these mammoths retain many of the same characteristics as modern-day elephants, including the signature long trunk, which maintains the exact same function, long, curvy tusk, very large molars, a massive imposing body, and hefty legs with shock-absorbing pads at the bottom of their feet. Moving on to the differences, while it shares a closer relationship to the modern-day Asian elephant, it would have had a two-fingered trunk instead of a single-fingered one like the larger African elephants. The backs of M. primigenius were also in an elevated slope-like shape, which is believed by scientists to have been a storage for fat and water similar to camels. Speaking of fat, the body of a woolly mammoth would have had a 10-centimeter thick layer of said tissue as a biological way to help cope with the extreme conditions of its environment. Along with this, it would have had longer tusks when compared to their modern-day relatives. Female individuals were seen to have a shorter pair than the males, which would have been longer and nearly curly. While they would also have flappy ears, they were much smaller than both the African and Asian elephants of today, as an adaptation to conserve heat loss and prevent frostbite. This exact same function can also be seen in their short, hairy tails. However, what separates M. primigenius aside from its other relatives is their iconic fur coat, which gave them the name woolly mammoth in the first place. These coats consisted of two different layers on the said proboscideans, the first one being the long and outermost guard hair that was coarse in texture. Beneath the guard hair lies a much shorter, denser, and slightly curlier underwool. Moving further up to the head, its fur was relatively short, but it would have been longer underneath and along the sides of its very long trunk. Along with this, we also know what color these creatures would have been if they were still alive today. In regards to size, while the woolly mammoth was smaller than other species within the genus Mammuthus, it was still a very large animal during its time. The mainland woolly mammoths were similar in size to the previously mentioned African bush elephant. The average size of M. primigenius would be an estimated 2.8 to 3.15 meters, or 9 feet 2 inches to 10 feet 4 inches in shoulder height, and 4,490.5 to 5,987.42 kilograms, or 9,900 to 13,200 pounds in weight for the males, and approximately 2.3 to 2.6 meters, or 7 feet 7 inches to 8 feet 6 inches in shoulder height, and 2,812.3 to 3,991.6 kilograms, or 6,200 to 8,800 pounds in weight for the smaller females. The woolly mammoth would have also had 3 different variants that occupied different environments. To start out, Western European mammoths would have been the largest to have ever lived. Males were estimated to have reached heights of up to 2.99 to 3.31 meters, or 9 feet 10 inches to 10 feet 10 inches, and weights of 4,989.5 to 6,803.9 kilograms, or 11,000 to 15,000 pounds. However, based upon a specimen called Siegsdorf in Germany, they would have been even larger, with an approximate shoulder height of 3.49 meters, or 11.5 feet, and an estimated weight of 8,164.66 kilograms, or 18,000 pounds. While there are unfortunately no confirmed size estimates for both Western European and Siberian female woolly mammoths, the latter would have existed for the males being approximately 2.66 to 2.94 meters, or 8 feet 9 inches to 9 feet 8 inches tall, and an average estimated weight of 3,900.9 to 5,216 kilograms, or 8,600 to 11,500 pounds. Despite the fact that there also aren't any confirmed size estimates for the Wrangel Island mammoths, they were known to have been much smaller than the mainland specimens discovered. Though importantly, they do not represent true dwarf species and are instead just smaller versions of the mainland population. Overall, the woolly mammoth's iconic physiology is among the most well-studied out of all extinct animals. There were many key characteristics of this species, from their hair color to the various different sizes they had between different populations, all representing just how unique and genetically diverse this extinct animal truly was. And of course, other members of its family would have also seen similar levels of diversity. woolly mammoth belongs to a unique and remarkable group of mammals known as Proboscidea. This order of mammals is part of the Afrotheria superorder, which includes golden moles, elephant shrews, otter shrews, tenrecs, aardvarks, hyraxes, sea cows, and of course, elephants, as well as several extinct clades. The term Afrotheria stems from the Latin word afro, meaning Africa, and the Greek word therion, meaning wild beast, with their origins possibly dating back to as late as the Cretaceous. These animals would range in size from a small mouse to animals that would rival the non-avian dinosaurs in size. Mammoths, more specifically, fall into Proboscidea, which is a sister clade to Sirenia, which branches off from the overarching Tethetheria clade and contains animals such as dugongs and manatees. And throughout the course of the Cenozoic, different extinct groups of proboscideans would come and go, like the Dinotheriids, mastodons, and belodontids, which alongside the Coriolephodontids includes genera that are often grouped into the paraphyletic Gomphotheres. While Dinotheriids and Gomphotheres were some of the oldest groups listed, even earlier genera would kickstart this massive legacy of these massive beasts, such as Merythotherium, Barytherium, and Salomia, the oldest currently described member of Proboscidea. Around the time of the late Miocene, a particular family of proboscideans would evolve known as Elephantidae, first described by British zoologist John Edward Gray in 1821. Elephantidae evolved from the previously mentioned Gomphotheres alongside the Stegodonts, and consist of the extant genera Loxodonta, which includes the African bush and forest elephants, and Elephas, which contains the Asian elephant and all of its subspecies. Along with this, extinct genera such as Paleoloxodon, Stegotetrabelodon, and the immensely popular Mammuthus, more commonly known as mammoths, were present within this family. The family itself is further divided into two subfamilies, which animals such as Stegotetrabelodon being part of Stegotetrabelodontidae, while modern elephants, Paleoloxodons, and mammoths being part of Elephantinae, alongside other genera such as Primelephas, Selenotherium, and several others. The phylogenetic placement within Elephantidae between the different genera is rather diversified in the species ancestry, with the genus of Loxodonta, otherwise known as the African elephants, being more closely related to Paleoloxodon than to Asian elephants. Meanwhile, the Asian elephants are more closely related to Mammuthus than to both African elephants and Paleoloxodon. The woolly mammoth in particular falls under the Mammuthus genus, which consists of 10 different species, with fossils having been found throughout Africa, Eurasia, and North America. These species can include the likes of the Columbia mammoth, steppe mammoth, Cretan dwarf mammoth, Channel Islands mammoth, and southern mammoth, just to name a few. Surprisingly, the oldest representative of the genus is Mammuthus subplanifrons from the late Miocene, about 6 million years ago in Africa. However, the woolly mammoth itself would diverge from the steppe mammoth around 650 to 500,000 years ago in Siberia, with the typical molar morphology seen in woolly mammoths first appearing at about 400,000 years ago. In regards to its phylogenetic placement with the Asian elephant, a 2010 study suggests that the woolly mammoth and the Asian elephant lineages diverged about 5.8 to 7.8 million years ago, while the African elephant diverged from a much earlier common ancestor about 6.6 to 8.8 million years ago. This, along with a 2015 study, would conclude that the Asian elephant is the closest living relative to the woolly mammoth. However, along with its relations to the extant Asian elephant, there were numerous regional and intermediate species as well as subspecies for the woolly mammoth, including M. intermedius, M. chosaricus, M. p. primigenius, M. p. jatskovi, M. p. sibiricus, M. p. frasi, M. p. leith adamsi, M. p. hydruntius, M. p. astensis, M. p. americanus, M. p. compressus, and M. p. alaskensis. However, the validity of these species and subspecies is uncertain. So far, they are either considered as basal forms of an advanced species or advanced forms of a basal species. One of the most interesting discoveries relating to the phylogenetic placement of the woolly mammoth is evidence of hybridization with its North American relative, the Columbian mammoth. The evidence comes from a 2011 genetic study where two examined specimens of the Columbian mammoth were grouped within the subclade of the woolly mammoths. The study suggests that the two populations interbred and produced fertile offspring. Some scientists have even suggested that one of the North American types that's formerly referred to as M. jeffersoni could be a hybrid between the woolly and Columbian mammoth. Another bit of evidence for hybridization came in a 2015 study that suggested that the animals in the range of the Columbian and woolly mammoth overlapped and formed a metapopulation of hybrids with varying morphology. Interestingly, the same study showed a similar relationship between the Eurasian woolly mammoth species and the steppe mammoth, where their ranges overlapped. A modern-day example of this type of hybridization can be found through similar lineages hybridizing due to overlapping populations is the growler bear, a hybrid between a grizzly bear and polar bear. In 2021, further evidence showed how these two different species were hybridizing through DNA that was sequenced from two different mammoth teeth from the specimens named Adichia and Krestovka, which showed different lineages, with Adichia being dated between 1 to 1.3 million years ago and was from a lineage that's more ancestral to later woolly mammoths, while Krestovka, being dated to 1.1 to 1.65 million years ago, belonged to a new lineage. Through this study, scientists concluded that half of the ancestry of Columbian mammoths have come from relatives in Krestovka's lineage, and the other half came from the lineage of woolly mammoths, with the hybridization happening more than 450,000 years ago, during the Middle Pleistocene. These findings are the first evidence of hybrid speciation from ancient DNA. The study also concluded that genetic adaptations to the cold environments such as hair growth and fat deposits were already present in the steppe mammoth lineage and isn't unique to woolly mammoths. Overall, the woolly mammoth belongs to a majestic and diverse lineage of mammals that has managed to dominate throughout much of the world and even managed to live in the most hostile environments on the planet. This group of animals both ranged from the bizarre to some of the most iconic animals known today, and all developed specific traits that help them thrive in some of the most extreme habitats. However, for the woolly mammoth, the Ice Age world was large and expansive, housing not just them, but a whole variety of other prehistoric beasts. During its reign, the woolly mammoth had an extensive range stretching across much of Eurasia to the northernmost parts of North America. This was in large part thanks to an expansive and highly productive biome known as the Mammoth Steppe, also known more specifically as Tundra Steppe. It stretched from the Iberian Peninsula to the Russian Far East, and thanks to a land bridge along the Bering Strait, this biome expanded into North America, particularly along the state of Alaska and northernmost Canada. This allowed the woolly mammoth to have perhaps the widest distribution out of any other species in its genus. Its southernmost range consisted of northeastern China, the Granada Depression in Spain, and the eastern United States. Along with that, the woolly mammoth also inhabited various islands, including St. Paul's Island in Alaska, Russia's Wrangel and Sakhalin Islands, and Hokkaido in the Japanese archipelago. In terms of native plants, the Mammoth Steppe was a largely treeless biome, with the flora being composed of a large concentration of grasses, herbs, and willow shrubs, making it an especially suitable location for a lot of grazing animals in the high north. While elephants generally have a varied diet that consists of both grazing and browsing, the shape of the molars on woolly mammoths in particular help indicate that this species was strictly a grazer. Because of how cold and dry the climate was in this biome, the woolly mammoth evolved several unique traits to help it thrive in these otherwise inhospitable conditions, beyond just having a thick coat of hair. For starters, woolly mammoths, at least the Siberian population, had an extra layer of skin near the tip of their trunk, which has been nicknamed the trunk mitten. This extension may have helped woolly mammoths pick grass off the ground without freezing their trunks. And because of how cold and dry the mammoth steppe could get, these mammoths also possessed an extra layer of skin along their posterior to help defecate without losing too much moisture in their body. As is common among elephants, woolly mammoths are likely to have been a highly social species, living in herds led by a matriarch, and like modern elephants, individual groups may have conjoined into far larger herds. Because of their open plains habitat, this was likely to be a more common occurrence for woolly mammoths than for modern African and Asian elephants, which inhabit woodland areas. On top of that, analysis of mammoth teeth from Poland indicate that woolly mammoths may have partaken in seasonal migrations. For the country-specific remains, they show that woolly mammoths may have thrived along Poland's southern regions during winter and then migrated to the Midlands during summer times. Because the woolly mammoth's tusks curved unlike those of modern elephants, they were likely used more as blunt weapons, whether it be in self-defense against predators or even when males fight amongst other males, as evidenced by damage to the shoulder blades of some fossils. Of course, these tusks could have potentially been used for display to impress females. We also now know that woolly mammoths may have also gone through must, much like modern elephants. As evidenced by the temporal glands between the ears and eyes of the Eucagir specimen, must is a period of increased reproductive hormones in a male elephant, categorized by the secretion of a liquid substance with a pungent aroma called temperin, accompanied with intense aggression. Not only would bull mammoths go through similar conditions, but their coats may have allowed for the temperin stench to spread greater distances. Various ailments have also been uncovered from various woolly mammoth remains, ranging from parasites to tooth decay, and bone diseases such as arthritis and osteoporosis, amongst many others. Some fossils even revealed healed bone fractures, further showing just how resilient these behemoths were during their prime. The woolly mammoth, however, was not the only animal calling the mammoth steppe home, as various other species inhabited these expansive grasslands. This included various ungulates, including steppe bison, musk ox, reindeer, megalosaurus, yak, wild horses, Siberian roe deer, moose, wild boar, and red deer, along with 3 extinct genera of rhinos, ranging from the elephant-sized Elasmotherium and 2 close relatives of the Sumatran rhino, Coelodonta antiquitatis, and a species of Stephanorhinus known as the narrow-nosed rhino. Other extinct ungulates would include extinct relatives of various Eurasian gazelles, deer, argali, and snow sheep. Along with that, various rodents and lagomorphs would have been present, ranging from steppe pikas to various species of hares, Arctic ground squirrels, alpine and Altai marmots, Eurasian beavers, lemmings, voles, and many others. With this large abundance of prey, the mammoth steppe was not without its fair share of predators. Smaller predators that would pose no threat to the mammoth would have consisted of foxes, such as the Arctic fox, red fox, and Corsic fox. Small felids such as the Pallas cat, along with mustelids such as stoats, polecats, and the wolverine. Mephitids would have also been present, with eastern Beringia being home to an extinct genus of skunk known as Brachyprotoma, also known as the short-faced skunk. Larger modern predators would have included brown bears, snow leopards, and wolves, with the mammoth steppe being home to 2 unique paleo subspecies of the gray wolf. These include Europe's cave wolf, which was well adapted to thriving during glacial cycles, and North America's Beringian wolf, an ancestral subspecies to the modern Mexican wolf, which may have even preyed on woolly mammoths. Apart from the modern brown bear, the North American stretch of this biome would have also been home to Arctodus, better known as the short-faced bear. On Wrangel Island, woolly mammoths would have crossed paths with the modern polar bear. In mainland Siberia, there was also the more herbivorous dwarf cave bear known as Ursus rossicus. Other extinct carnivorans would include a paleo subspecies of spotted hyena known as the cave hyena, and a big cat known as the Eurasian cave lion, the latter which spread from Europe to North America alongside the woolly mammoth. These two were likely not frequent hunters of mammoth, prioritizing other prey items. However, isotopic analysis do indicate the mammoths were fed on by cave lions and hyenas, though they likely only targeted the young or the old and weak, or even simply scavenged off the remains. One large felid that was especially known for hunting mammoths was a genus of saber-toothed known as Homotherium, or the scimitar-toothed cat. Alas, by the late Pleistocene, Homotheriums were very rare in Eurasia and in eastern Beringia. Isotopic analysis indicated that Alaskan Homotheriums were not specialized mammoth hunters. Birds would have also been abundant in the woolly mammoth's range, including ravens, white-tailed eagles, golden eagles, snowy owls, gyr falcons, willow grouse, and yellow bustards. While not present in the fossil record, some vultures, such as the griffin and Caenereus vultures, were likely to have been present in the Eurasian stretch of the mammoth steppe, potentially even being common scavengers. Other animals were also present in the mammoth steppe, but stuck closer to the forested and mountainous ecotones. These included a species of megalosaurus known colloquially as the Irish elk, along with cave bears, European leopards, Eurasian lynxes, and Canada lynxes, just to name a few. The woolly mammoth's distribution and the spread of the steppe tundra was also heavily dependent on the shifting cycles. The last ice age underwent events known known as glacial and interglacial cycles. Glacial cycles were categorized by lowered sea levels and expanding glaciers and colder temperatures. This allowed for the connection of mainlands to islands and the formation of land bridges such as the Bering Land Bridge. This also caused the formation of the refugias, which contracted the ranges of animals that thrive in warmer climates and/or forested areas. The enclosing of the Bering Sea and Arctic Ocean also pushed some Arctic animals farther south, allowing Arctic animals like the beluga whale and the walrus to inhabit states like Vermont, California, and South Carolina. Interglacial cycles, like the one we currently inhabit, are the antithesis of the former. As sea levels rise, temperatures increase, and the glaciers recede, reopening the Bering Sea and Arctic Ocean for the Arctic's aforementioned marine fauna and extinct species like the stellar sea cow. During these interglacial cycles, the northern hemisphere also saw an altering of the vegetation, including an expansion of forested areas, which would have contracted the mammoth steppe and therefore the woolly mammoth's distribution. During this time, the woolly mammoth would be replaced by other proboscideans like the American mastodon in eastern Beringia and a fellow elephant Paleoloxodon in much of Eurasia, along with the expansion of other animals like aurochs in Eurasia and elk, western camels, peccaries, the giant beaver Castoroides, and ground sloths known as Megalonyx in North America. These events may have also allowed for the dispersal of predators farther up to the north like tigers and dholes, for example, who generally favor forested habitats. Surprisingly, while hippos in particular are generally found in warmer areas and were more common in Europe during interglacial cycles, recent evidence from the Upper Rhine Graben in southwest Germany show that the modern hippo species managed to thrive in the region even during a glacial cycle from between 47 to 31,000 years ago, meaning that they could have likely come across woolly mammoths before their extirpation. When the cycle shifted once again, this allowed for the spread of the steppe and for the woolly mammoth's range to expand once more. Of course, while the woolly mammoth is well suited for a life in the frigid north, it wasn't without its limitations. Severe temperature drops could pose a deadly threat to these elephants, even to calves. Outside of the mammoth steppe and farther south from eastern Beringia, woolly mammoth fossils were found in the Saltville archaeological site in Virginia, alongside remains of the aforementioned short-faced bears, giant beavers, and horses, along with American mastodons, Megalonyx, a musk ox relative, Butherium, and the stag moose. Some mammoth remains display signs of potential scavenging, possibly by either wolves, short-faced bears, or maybe even predators yet to be excavated from the site, such as the American lion or the dire wolf. Along with that, despite the two species occupying vastly different ranges in North America, there may have been cases where distribution between woolly mammoths and the far larger Columbian mammoths may have overlapped, with potential interbreeding between the two species having been uncovered in British Columbia. With such a vast distribution and even owing its name to one of the largest biomes in Earth's history, the mammoth has cemented itself as not only an Ice Age icon, but perhaps one of the most successful animals to have ever inhabited the Holarctic realm, and easily one of the most widely distributed elephants of all time. As perhaps the most famous Ice Age animal, the woolly mammoth has a vast and expansive history within the pop cultural landscape. Due to this, and similar to our previous video on Tyrannosaurus rex, we will not be able to mention every single pop culture appearance it has ever had. However, we will still endeavor to cover many of its most prominent appearances throughout the years. With that said, mammoths have been a part of human culture since as long as our species have coexisted. In fact, we have been making artwork of these mighty proboscideans for thousands of years, such as the famous cave paintings, the oldest known of which dating between 26 to 32,000 years BCE, which would be in the Chauvet Cave of Ardèche, France. In this cave, the woolly mammoth was illustrated alongside numerous other Ice Age animals, such as woolly rhinos, cave lions, and horses, just to name a few. While it has unfortunately lost its original preservation due to the mold caused by massive crowds since its discovery in 1994, this is currently the oldest known record of woolly mammoths in any form of human culture. However, moving on to modern culture with movies, TV shows, and documentaries, its first appearance would be in 1914 in the short film created by the American animator Winsor McCay titled Gertie the Dinosaur, where it is thrown into a lake by the titular character. Over a decade later, in 1925, the Woolly Mammoth would star in the silent German documentary 50 Million Years Ago with its own claymation model. This is currently the oldest documentary appearance of the Woolly Mammoth. Later on, in 1955, it starred in the Czech film Journey to the Beginning of Time on a boat cruise. The mammoth is also one of the many different extinct animals within the 1960s show The Flintstones, where it is typically depicted as a water appliance. Later on, within 1981, it starred in the stop-motion documentary by Mark D. Wolf called The Age of Mammals alongside numerous other Cenozoic animals. Going into the 2000s, while the woolly mammoth was already a highly popular animal prior, throughout this new millennium, its fame would grow even higher. Starting in 2000 itself, the documentary Raising the Mammoth would debut and discuss the discovery of the Jarkov mammoth in Siberia, and the potential of it having surviving DNA. Its 2001 sequel, that being Land of the Mammoth, would be a direct sequel about other Pleistocene megafauna along with the life and death of the Jarkov mammoth. While the US had produced numerous mammoth documentaries up to this point, they were not the only ones, as the British would also produce documentaries about this beast.
A change in the Earth's orbit is taking it further from the sun. This has brought on an ice age.
In the same year as the aforementioned Land of the Mammoth, the six-parter docuseries Walking with Beast, a sequel to the previously released Walking with Dinosaurs, would dedicate their final episode to the woolly mammoth, and would subsequently name it Mammoth Journey. The episode follows a matriarchal herd of woolly mammoths as they venture across Europe in the coldest ice age yet. While they make their way to their destination, they unfortunately fall in the hands of a group of Neanderthals on their way back to the Summerlands, consequently losing the matriarch herself. The same model used for this series would later be seen in 2003's Walking with Caveman, also produced by BBC, as they are once again hunted by 3 Neanderthals. As far as movies are concerned, prior to Walking with Caveman, it would gain perhaps its most significant pop culture appearance of all time with a Blue Sky Studios movie centered around life in the Cenozoic era. In 2002, the highly popular Ice Age movie would be released into theaters and chronicle the adventures of Diego the Smilodon, Sid the Megalonyx, and of course Manfred, or Manny, the woolly mammoth. Ice Age would see the lone bull mammoth Manny come across a desperate Megalonyx being chased down by 2 Brontotheres. Upon saving this Megalonyx,
"Stop following me,"
Manny realizes he is now stuck with Sid, and the two begin their story together, wherein they quickly come across a prehistoric human who gives the duo her baby before she slips away into the river, never to be seen again. Tasked with returning the baby to its herd, the unlikely duo teams up with the Smilodon Diego, and the trio trek across the Ice Age world to reach Glacier Pass before it closes up, so they can deliver the baby to its herd. Along this journey, the 4 mammals would become unlikely friends and form a strong bond with each other, eventually convincing the Smilodon to betray his old pack for his new herd, defending Manny and almost dying in the process. Ice Age performed rather well in theaters, having an opening weekend of $46.6 million, which was higher than the initially projected $30 million, and ultimately making a grand total of $383.2 million by the end of its run. It would also receive moderate critical acclaim, as well as being well loved by audiences. Its success would also spawn the Ice Age franchise, which would slowly introduce more and more mammoths as Manny grows his family and finds new mammoths to live with. Ice Age 1 would also heavily direct pop cultural interest in Cenozoic life, cementing the iconic status of already popular animals such as the mammoth and Smilodon, but also raising up more obscure animals to near equal stardom such as Megalonyx. The sequel to Ice Age would be released 4 years later with Ice Age: The Meltdown. In this movie, Manny would realize that he may end up being the last woolly mammoth to ever exist. However, he is eventually proven wrong when he meets Ellie, his soon-to-be wife who once believed that she was a possum along with her brothers Crash and Eddie. As everyone reluctantly gets along with one another,
You guys are so dead! Thanks for embarrassing me!
whilst trying to escape a flash flood, Manny and Ellie get caught up in it, but fortunately survive. Once more, the exact same flash flood that almost killed them also revealed that they are anything but the last mammoths around, as a massive herd appears from behind a hill once the waters subside. Following this movie, the herd would be bigger than ever and will make appearances in many more movies, specials, and also appear in numerous video games. Prior to Ice Age: The Meltdown, the woolly mammoth would be featured as the only extinct creature in the popular Disney movie Brother Bear in 2003, along with its sequel Brother Bear 2 3 years later once again in 2006. In the same year as both sequel films to Ice Age and Brother Bear, the woolly mammoth makes yet another star appearance in the hit BBC show Prehistoric Park, in the second episode A Mammoth Undertaking. In A Mammoth Undertaking, time-traveling zoologist and adventurer Nigel Marven goes back in time to save a woolly mammoth from extinction. After struggling for a brief time finding one, he eventually finds a lone female that he returns to the sanctuary and eventually names Martha. Martha would turn out to be a prominent animal shown within the short series, typically shown attempting to get along with a herd of African elephants, getting a haircut, and perhaps most famously, saving a baby elephant from Matilda, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. In the same year as Prehistoric Park, the woolly mammoth makes a brief cameo appearance in the movie Night at the Museum. In 2008, the Legendary Pictures film 10,000 BC also depicts the woolly mammoth in various segments throughout the movie, most famously in a hunt along with a stampede scene. Throughout the next couple of years, the woolly mammoth would make numerous minor appearances in documentaries, including 2009's Animal Armageddon, 2010's Prehistoric, and 2013's Titans of the Ice Age by Giant Screen Films, and BBC's Ice Age Giants in the episode Land of the Cave Bear. Outside of documentaries, the woolly mammoth is featured in a single 2014 episode in the popular TV series Game of Thrones, titled The Watchers on the Wall. In this episode, a single mammoth appears during the Battle of the Wall, with two giants attempting to use it to open an outer gate. Though once one of the members of the Night's Watch drops explosives towards it, it runs away in fear. Along with this, 2015 finds the woolly mammoth within the popular manga anime series One Piece as an ancient zone devil fruit used by the character Jack. Afterwards, it is eventually shown in the 2018 documentary Age of Big Cats, as well as a herd being hunted by Spear and Fang in the 2019 Genndy Tartakovsky series Primal. In 2021, a massive woolly mammoth fossil site in Swindon is discussed by David Attenborough in the titular documentary Attenborough and the Mammoth Graveyard. Following this, it would appear in the final chapter of Life on Our Planet, Age of Ice and Fire. In the last episode, a herd of mammoths is seen taking a journey before eventually being ambushed by a nearby pride of cave lions. Subsequently, a teenage individual is stranded from the herd and is killed by a single lion whilst the rest of the woolly mammoths helplessly watch. However, its most recent appearance in a documentary wouldn't take place until 2 years later in 2025, that being the third season of the groundbreaking BBC and Apple TV exclusive Prehistoric Planet Ice Age. Much like its previous two seasons regarding Mesozoic life within the Maastrichtian stage of the late Cretaceous, this latest one would cover some of the latest fauna to exist during the late Pleistocene epoch in the Cenozoic era, including, of course, the woolly mammoth. In the first scene of this show, we get a glimpse of a mother in labor attempting to survive in a harsh snowstorm. Though she manages to give birth to her offspring in the middle of it, they both nearly freeze to death. That is, until a large group of these animals appear and huddle up with them for warmth, saving the duo. Through the course of the 5 total episodes, the woolly mammoth would make other notable appearances, including the previously mentioned first episode, The Big Freeze, surviving a drought and a vast sandstorm in grasslands and fighting off against a desperately hungry pack of Homotherium in the final episode, The Big Melt. To date, this would be the most accurate depiction shown in any form on the big screen, giving the audience the closest possible chance to seeing a living, breathing woolly mammoth once again. As far as video games go, the woolly mammoth has made numerous appearances in this category as well, with its first being in the 1985 Sega arcade game Space Harrier. Later on, in 2001, it can be one of the many Cenozoic creatures you can hunt in the PC and mobile game Carnivore's Ice Age. The following year, the first Zoo Tycoon game of the franchise released a DLC named Dinosaur Digs, which adds the woolly mammoth along with a multitude of other extinct creatures. Going into 2006, the hit Pokemon franchise released its 4th generation, that being Diamond and Pearl, and added a plethora of final and pre-evolutions to many Pokemon released in prior seasons, one of which evolved from the hog-like Piloswine from the Johto region into a much larger and mammoth-based animal called Mamoswine. In 2008, it would make its way into the Fossil Fighters franchise as the water-type Venusaur known as Mammoth. 3 years later, going into 2011, the woolly mammoth is one of the largest creatures to hunt and gather material from in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. As for its entry into the Jurassic franchise, the woolly mammoth was the second obtainable animal in the now shut down 2012 mobile game Jurassic Park Builder, and was a bronze tier creature and fighter in the Glacier Park. Along with this, it would also star in later Jurassic games such as Jurassic World the Game in 2015 and Jurassic World Alive in 2019. In the same year as the aforementioned Jurassic World the Game, the woolly mammoth would be featured in the open-world survival game Ark Survival Evolved, and is an uncommon animal to find within the northernmost Arctic regions of the island. It would also appear in its much later sequel game Ark Survival Ascended. However, going back to 2016, another open-world survival game would feature the woolly mammoth, that being the primitive addition to the Far Cry franchise known as Far Cry Primal. In this game, it is first shown in a hunt by the protagonist, Takar and his fellow Wenja, and later is once again an uncommon animal to encounter. Additionally, the gigantic blood tusk mammoth is the largest creature in the game, along with the final beast hunt that Takar must take on. Prior to Ark Survival Ascended, which released in 2023, 2022 starred the woolly mammoth in the PC park building game Prehistoric Kingdom, which features 3 skin variants including the medium-sized Siberian mammoth, the massive European mammoth, and the much smaller Wrangel Island mammoth. Mammuthus primigenius, more commonly referred to as the woolly mammoth, has made a massive appearance in the pop cultural landscape since its discovery. From all the way back before the Common Era up to now in the current year of 2025, it will surely be featured more as the years go on as the biggest Ice Age icon. The woolly mammoth was one of the most successful animals to ever live on planet Earth, being able to thrive at a time where climate conditions were at their most dramatic in ages, seeing large swaths of the planet completely frozen in ice. However, this would all begin to change towards the end of the last ice age, when the woolly mammoth would begin to vanish from Eurasia and the Americas. Most of the woolly mammoth's population started to decline between the late Pleistocene to the middle Holocene. Of course though, the mammoth wasn't the only species to experience a decline at this time. In fact, all across planet Earth, most major megafaunal species were experiencing similar declines. Places like Eurasia, which were home to species like the woolly rhinos and cave lions, and even the Americas, which was home to giant short-faced bears and ground sloths, all witnessed a disappearance of these Ice Age giants. This decline would begin around 40,000 years ago, but would be most noticeable somewhere between 14,000 to 11,000 years ago. The cause of this significant die-off of megafauna is currently believed to have been due to two primary factors, the first of which being changes to the climate. During the last interglacial cycle, before the most recent glacial maximum, it is believed that the woolly mammoth, as well as other steppe fauna in Eurasia, were under pressure due to contractions of the steppe tundra. And as the habitats were shrinking and the populations of mammoths were bottlenecked, this restricted the woolly mammoth's range from spreading further north. However, despite this phenomena, a rebound for their populations would occur during the following glacial periods. It would be the last glacial maximum that the distribution of the woolly mammoth would see its final expansion. And indeed, this would be a time when mammoths were found everywhere from Eurasia to northern Asia, and eventually crossing to North America. The only natural barriers that prevented their range from spreading further would be ice sheets, other types of grasslands, mountain chains, year-round water surfaces, and finally, deserts. Despite this surprising bounce back in mammoth distribution, things started to change in places like Siberia around 15,000 years ago. As the last glacial period was reaching its end, the vast steppe biome that the woolly mammoth depended on would start disappearing and eventually be replaced with wet tundra as well as boreal and temperate forest, environments that the woolly mammoth would find unfavorable. This resulted in a gradual decline in mammoth populations over time. However, as stated previously, this was only one of two major factors that lead to the ultimate decline of the woolly mammoth. The second would likely be the final nail in the coffin on most, if not all, mainland mammoth populations in conjunction with the loss of habitat. For despite the cave bears, lions, direwolves, and other predators that existed with and preyed upon the woolly mammoth, there was one particular predator that had been driving megafauna to extinction all across the globe. Throughout its existence, the woolly mammoth would have shared its Ice Age world with several species of bipedal, predatory ape that had exhibited extraordinary high levels of intelligence, completely unheard of prior in the animal kingdom. Though it would be one species of these predatory apes in particular that would bring about the near total destruction of the woolly mammoth, that being Homo sapiens, man himself. Humans had coexisted with the woolly mammoth since the Upper Paleolithic. This was when humans entered Europe from Africa between 30,000 to 40,000 years ago, though other species such as Homo neanderthalensis had been coexisting with woolly mammoths for much longer. In some areas, the woolly mammoth was seen as a very important part of the lives of Ice Age humans, as they would have provided many materials that ensured their survival, such as their bones and tusks being utilized to help build shelters to protect them from the cold, as well as their thick hides. The mammoth was also an important food source for humans. How much it was relied upon remains unknown, but evidence of predation is corroborated by discoveries of mammoth butcher sites, where the bones can be seen with breaks, cuts, and even tools for cutting and breaking found not far away. However, many sites may have also been scavenged sites, where humans too may have acted as scavengers, feasting upon already dead mammoths. As stated previously, humans had a significant relationship with the woolly mammoth. Evidence of their coexistence spans from the various cave paintings to carved mammoth sculptures from the animal's ivory, which could have been carried anywhere the humans went. The woolly mammoth was a staple of the lives of early humans, but unfortunately, due to the aforementioned decline in habitat from the changing climate, combined with consistent human hunting, the woolly mammoth would eventually be driven to almost complete and total extinction on the mainland. Some populations of woolly mammoths would continue to make their home within places like Britain up to as late as 14,500 to 14,000 years ago. Mammoths were also still in areas like Estonia in Eastern Europe and Saltville in Eastern North America up to around 14,510 years ago as well. However, by around 10,000 years ago, the mainlands were almost completely devoid of woolly mammoths. Where once could be heard the thunderous footsteps and triumphant calls of hundreds of thousands of mammoths, now laid silent, absent of any calls from these once so dominating creatures. Indeed, now only the calls of the more modern animals that were better suited to surviving this new world would replace the trumpeting calls of these Ice Age titans. The woolly mammoth was now almost entirely extinct on the mainland, their once magnificent calls now nearly completely silenced as humans expanded into the lands of the north, now devoid of these most iconic of creatures. But every so often, if the winds were blowing just right, some of these early humans in the high north just might have caught the faintest of calls. A small, delicate trumpeting sound from across the freezing oceans. What was this mysterious sound? These humans had not known of mammoths in generations. Did they even register this faint sound as something more than a slight quirk of the wind? It is impossible to say. But what can be said is that before the ultimate extinction of the woolly mammoth on the mainland, the melting of the ice sheets began to isolate small populations that had survived in Beringia on islands that were now isolated from human interaction. These isolated woolly mammoths would survive far longer than their mainland counterparts in 4 key areas. According to 2 environmental DNA studies, it is possible that mammoths may have survived in the Yukon until 5,700 years ago, though not much about this population is known aside from genetic evidence of their existence. Alternatively, the other 3 areas represent much better known populations. The first of these 3 is St. Paul's Island in Alaska. St. Paul's Island is located 400 miles north of the Aleutian Islands, which was once part of the Bering Land Bridge. The St. Paul's Island mammoth population arrived before the sea levels rose to constrict the island. This was realized based on radiocarbon studies of the bones from the island, as well as environmental proxies, that being the fungi spores found on the island and sediment cores from sediment-filled lakes, which would be used to determine when the woolly mammoth population died out. The data taken from the spores shows 3 different fungal species populations declined alongside the mammoths. This was likely due to the fact that these fungi species grow on the dung of large animals. As for the core samples found in the lake, they would show the presence of mammoth DNA, and eventually they would be dated around 5,650 years ago. How the mammoths died on the island would once again be due to the continued rising of sea levels, shrinking the island until available freshwater supplies would diminish with the incoming of salt water. This problem was exacerbated by the mammoth's instinct to dig holes near the surviving lakes when the water would become cloudy and turgid. This led to an increase of erosion at the lakes, eventually filling the lakes up with sediment, and combined with the saltwater encroachment of the last remaining freshwater sources, it becomes evident that the lack of fresh water is what killed off the last mammoths on St. Paul's. The final extinction of mammoths on St. Paul's would represent the final gasp of the Proboscidea order in the entirety of the New World. Continents that once hosted animals such as Columbian steppe and woolly mammoths, the famous mastodons as well as gomphotheres, would not hear the calls of these animals again until the modern era, when elephants from Africa and India were brought over for displays in zoos. However, this would not represent the ultimate extinction of the woolly mammoth. That would come 2,000 years later. The last 2 refugiums of the woolly mammoth would see these populations last significantly longer. While the North American populations were extinct by 5,700 years ago and 5,600 years ago respectively, these 2 populations would last well into the Bronze Age of human history. Those being the mammoths of the Tamir Peninsula and perhaps most famously, the mammoths of Wrangel Island. As of now, the current consensus as to the date of extinction of the Taimyr Peninsula is around 4,100 to 3,900 years ago. The Taimyr Peninsula is located in the far north of Siberia. What made this place another one of the final strongholds for the woolly mammoth was the environment itself acted as a refugium for the mammoth steppe, the biome that mammoth thrived best in during the Ice Age. The steppe tundra that was there provided the same dry vegetation that mammoths were suited for, with the same going for other animals like the horse species within the area. Through the help with an eDNA test, it is determined that the population of mammoths on the Taimyr Peninsula survived much longer on the mainland. While the bones uncovered are dated around 10,700 years, the DNA samples recovered suggest that the mammoths were able to survive up until 4,000 years ago. As for their actual extinction, so far it would appear that the last mainland mammoths may have also suffered the same fate as those on the islands, a shrinking of habitat and resources to which eventually pushed them to extinction. This was concluded through mitochondrial genome haplogroups. On the other hand, exists the Wrangel Island population of mammoths. Wrangel Island is a large island in the Arctic Ocean around 87 miles from the mainland that is roughly the size of Yellowstone National Park, and is largely agreed to be the last place on Earth where woolly mammoths survived. Mammoths would first arrive on the region of Wrangel Island when it was still a peninsula connected to mainland Siberia. However, around 10,000 years ago, the island would be cut off from the mainland due to rising sea levels associated with the melting of the last glaciers. This isolation is estimated to have cut off an initial population of around 8 mammoths from mainland Siberia. From this initial population of just 8 individuals, the mammoth population would begin its final expansion before its ultimate extinction, rising to around 200 to 300 individuals, and these individuals would last the longest out of all mammoth populations. The mammoths of Wrangel Island, while completely unaware of the existence of humans, would have nevertheless been contemporaries to the rise of human civilization. When the River Valley civilizations had just begun laying their groundwork, woolly mammoths were alive and well on Wrangel Island, as the pyramids of Egypt were being constructed during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. Mammoths were clashing their tusks together in the high Arctic. As Sargon of Akkad took his armies to conquer the lands of Mesopotamia and forged the first ever empire in human history, mammoths were rearing their young and foraging on the plentiful food of Wrangel, and they continued to survive as Sargon's successors first consolidated his gains and ultimately lost his empire. The mammoths were alive for it all, while Abraham was living his holy life, and while Ian Nasir was selling rather low-quality copper. Mammoths were alive and well in the high north of our planet. However, while they made it almost to the modern day, the mammoths of Wrangel did eventually go extinct. But perhaps somewhat ironically, the exact reason as to the final extinction of the most iconic animal of the entire Cenozoic period is currently unknown. The one thing we know for certain is that the predatory ape that had driven their mainland cousins to extinction did not end up killing off the last mammoths of Wrangel. The final extinction of the woolly mammoth is dated to around 3,730 years ago, while evidence of humans on the island would be dated to as late as 3,600 years ago, over a century after the mammoths actually went extinct. So if it wasn't human hunting, what actually killed these titans of the Ice Age? Initially, a theory known as genetic meltdown was proposed to answer this question. The genetic meltdown idea essentially proposes that, due to a small starting population of mammoths, there was not enough significant genetic diversity, and that over time the animals of Wrangel would accumulate so many harmful genetic mutations that the animals would simply become inviable as their genetic code disintegrated in functionality. We now know that this is wrong. In 2024, a study was published pertaining to the genetic diversity of the last mammoths of Wrangel Island, and what it concluded was that by the end of the age of the woolly mammoth, individuals on Wrangel were beginning to purge harmful genetic mutations via natural selection, meaning that while the lack of genetic diversity was an issue, it was not what killed off the woolly mammoths, as they had reached a population that was large enough that these genetic mutations could be selected against due to natural selection. As to what actually killed off the last of the mammoths, it's impossible to say with any certainty. Perhaps it was a disease that struck the whole population, or a particularly bad winter where no food was able to grow. All we can say for certain is that when humans arrived on the island 3,600 years ago, all of the mammoths, the animals that once ruled the Ice Age world, were now extinct, victims of the inevitable march of time. Though the woolly mammoth may be gone from our world today, its legacy is that of what is possibly the most magnificent animal to ever walk on Earth during the time of the last Ice Age. The idea that, in the not too distant past, elephants covered in shaggy hair with massive curved tusks once dominated the northern regions of our planet, sounding off their triumphant calls to echo across the high north, is an idea that inspires millions alive today. And the stories of these animals told in stone paintings and in frozen bones are the stories of the animals that held on to the Ice Age longer than almost any other of the famous megafauna, lasting into the times of our earliest civilizations. We today are so captivated by these ancient animals that we often look towards the future, eagerly awaiting the day that our own technology has advanced to the point that we can rectify one of our species' biggest mistakes and revive an ancient megafaunal legacy of the animal that we so call the woolly mammoth. Thank you all for watching our video on what is quite possibly the most famous extinct animal of all time, the woolly mammoth. This video was an amazing ride to create, and it has been a joy getting to tell the story of this true Ice Age wonder, and with that, we all hope you enjoyed the video. The video was directed and narrated by myself, TheDinosaurHunter, scripted by myself, the Primal Earth, RangoGamer, CrimsonAcro, and LegitEliminator. Edited by MikeMC9797, LegitEliminator, SpinoDragon145, Straight Up Murph, TheDinosaurHunter, the Primal Earth, and CrimsonAcro. The graphic designers include TheDinosaurHunter for the thumbnail and animations, and Straight Up Murph for the concept designs. Finally, the research team includes TheDinosaurHunter, RangoGamer, the Primal Earth, LegitEliminator, and CrimsonAcro. This video was also released on the same day as a special event that takes place at the museum I currently work at, the Museum of the Middle Appalachians in Saltville, Virginia. The event is called Woolly Mammoth Day. Hosted by the museum itself, this event is a dedicated weather prediction that also celebrates all things woolly mammoth. If you would like to donate to the Museum of the Middle Appalachians, their donation page is linked in the description below. If you wish to see more content like this, make sure to like and subscribe or share the video with friends and communities to help the channel grow. Once again, thank you all for watching. We will see you next time.